What it do? Welcome to another new episode of Locked On Bucks. On today's show, the Bucks take a 1-0 series lead over the Indiana Pacers with a 94 to 109 win. We're going to break it all down and talk about sustainability as well on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis. You can catch me weekly on the Technical File podcast, as well as the Pack a Day podcast every Friday. Joining me is Frank Madden, longtime voice of the pod and the founder of BrewHoop.com. We truly do appreciate you for tuning in, and thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Frank, game one. It's done, out the way. The Bucks maintain home court. I don't know about you, but I didn't exactly know how the Bucks were going to come out in game one. It feels really good for them to kick off the playoffs with a win after seeing like all the other teams hold home court. I was like, how likely is it for that to maintain the whole weekend? But the Bucks hung on, maintained home court, had a big win to kick off this series against the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, I mean, especially given the circumstances, the season that this team went through, the injury to Giannis, I certainly wasn't expecting him to play after, kind of everything we did and didn't hear over the past week and just generally what we know about the history of this type of injury. So to come out of game one with, a relatively comfortable win, Dame kind of gets off the schneid with this, greatest first half in, Bucks playoff history. And then you ride, Khris Middleton and a good enough defense for the rest of the way. Ultimately, one of the best defensive performances that the Pacers have seen this year. You look at kind of their season numbers. No notes, right? Like, of course, we'll have a few notes, a few things that maybe we saw that they may need to clean up on or that we should watch for, in game two, as far as things that the Pacers are going to make adjustments to. But for the most part, this is, just a huge win. And obviously you got home court, you have to defend home court. But I think especially with the idea that Giannis, knock on wood, will come back at some point in this series.
Mm-hmm.
It was this weird dynamic. The pressure was on, I think, the Pacers to a large extent. They were, I think, favored by most of the quote unquote experts at this stage to win this series. And that obviously was hinging on them taking advantage of the time when Giannis doesn't play. So to take game one with Giannis out, to say, hey, you know what, Pacers, like, this is a game that you guys have a great opportunity to win. We've seen the Bucks in years past. Game ones have been banana peels for them to come out and, from maybe not the word jump, right? I mean, they it's not like they blew the doors off the Pacers from the start, but took control in the first quarter, sort of in the late first quarter. Dame setting the tone with his 3-point shooting and mixing in some attacks of the rim going to his left. And then they blow it open with Khris Middleton and that second unit, which was a theme in the fourth quarter as well. Obviously just a huge win for this team. And, unfortunately you can't rest on your laurels. You can't sit back and say, hey, great, we did it. Right. Well, you got to win 3 more of these damn games. And you really want to win that second game to protect home court coming up on Tuesday. But yeah, just a great win. The crowd was fantastic. And, I think if you were architecting, a result from this first game, you couldn't have asked for much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, there is some perspective to have here. It's one game in the series. The Bucks need to get 3 more of those victories against the Pacers to move on. But like you meant, the first half, we got to start with Dame and what we saw with that 35-point explosion from him in the first half. Like, it was during that moment where it's like, this is the Dame that everybody's been waiting for. And he himself, like you see the highlight going around on social media with him just yelling to the crowd, like, this is what I came here for. Like, this is what y'all brought me here for. Like, I'm ready for the moment. He was beating defenders off the dribble, converting and ones, knocking down 4-point plays, hitting step back threes. Like the bag was, he was in his bag and he was just putting the Pacers through the paces. Like, nothing they could do at certain points. Like, I saw a stat float around from Stat Mama just saying that players to record at least 35 points and 5+ made 3-pointers in a single half, NBA history. Damian Lillard joins the only other person on that list, which happens to be Michael Jordan. Like, it was just amazing watching Dame put on the show like that to kick off the first playoff game for the Bucks after the season they've had, and especially with all the noise we've been hearing from certain national outlets about Dame's happiness and what's going to happen next with Dame, and people are monitoring the situation. So seeing him come out, have a historic first half, something we've never seen a Bucks player do in the playoffs, something Dame has never done himself in his career, was just such a fun treat to start the game.
Yeah, and I mean, we've spent the whole year wondering what is playoff Dame going to be, right? And certainly, in the month of December when Dame was kind of finding his rhythm, and it seemed like, okay, this is the Damian Lillard that we thought we'd get. Maybe he's not scoring at the same volume because he's sharing the ball with Giannis and Khris, but you felt like, okay, this is heading in that direction that we expected. But from kind of the new year on, obviously it's been really stop-start. There was the encouraging kind of 6-game winning streak right after the All-Star break. Some hints here and there, over the past month that maybe he was kind of getting back into what you wanted him to be. But at the end of the day, like, even if he had a great regular season, right, everything was going to be measured by what happened in the playoffs. This is the reality of being a Milwaukee Bucks fan, and a reality of being a Milwaukee Bucks player in terms of how you are measured. You are measured by what you do in May and June, April, May and June, not what you do, in October through April. And so, unfortunately, we didn't see as much consistency, obviously, as we wanted to. And even in this game, right, for him to have the historic 35-point first half, and then second half, obviously they doubled, did everything they could to get the ball out of his hands. He goes 0 for 5, doesn't score a single point, and it doesn't matter. Certainly it'll be interesting to see kind of which of those things kind of what carries over into game 2. And that's the next question for Dame is, you've shown us that you can, be a freaking supernova in the playoffs now in your very first half as a Buck. But what is the level of consistency going to be there? And that's been kind of my big question. Is I figured he was going to have some great games, right? But you just worry that he's going to be like, I don't know. I mean, this is, again, not stylistically, but just in terms of results. Like, you just really don't want him to be like what James Harden was in that Celtics series a year ago, right? Where he has like 2 amazing games and makes like big shots to win a couple games against the Celtics, but then the rest of the series is like, ugh, And it's felt like that's kind of been Dame's season, right? It's like he has an amazing game, maybe he has 2 or even 3 consecutive games where it feels like it's kind of getting there, but then the consistency just is there, and you get the letdown games, and it just feels like, I don't know, is he just getting an age where he just can't dial it up, 3 times a week when you have that many games? So we'll see. I mean, all eyes are going to be on him, but he deserves an absolute ton of credit.
Yeah.
You worry. I mean, again, would have been natural to come out with some butterflies to feel a bit of the pressure, and he just embraced it, right? I mean, he just completely leaned into it. And some of the shot making, it's not like he was just getting easy shots that the Pacers were just, giving him wide open looks. Again, I think they could have done more, certainly, and we saw that in the second half. But I mean, this was all about what Dame did, to me, less about the Pacers just like making huge mistakes. I mean, some of the shot making was just incredible. There was some very good defense being played at time by Andrew Nembhard and company. But this was just watching greatness at work.
Yeah, good offense always beats a good defense, and that's what we saw with Dame during that first half explosion. And something coming into this game that I was keeping an eye on, I know most Bucks fans were, was like, when will Dame sit? We saw Doc roll with that rotation that Dame himself mentioned early on with Adrian Griffin. Like, I prefer to play this way, where I play the whole first quarter, play the whole third quarter, and like get me some rest in the second and the fourth to start, and then let me cook the rest of the way. And that's the way that his playoff minutes went as well. So it was really interesting coming into this game. Like, how will it look when Dame is on the bench and the Bucks have to survive with just Khris on the court? I was like, hopefully there are no Khris and Dame list lineups in this game. And luckily we didn't see that with Khris maintaining the bench unit while Dame was on the bench. So want to talk about those non-Dame minutes and some other guys who showed up in key moments for the Bucks in this playoff win right after this. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard isn't looking good. So you're feeling low. You're not sure you or your team can pull out the win. And then you dig real deep. You lift your head up and you say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game. It's time to pull off some bank heists and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The Smash Mobile hit game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most richest and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to all of your buddies. And there's just so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. I don't know about y'all Facebook timelines, but Monopoly Go has been caught, like, that's caused some problems on my timeline. You can also charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra awards and climb the leaderboard. So get back up out there, y'all. Put on your game face. Download Monopoly Go now for free in the App Store or Google Play. I keep it real with y'all on this show, and I've mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. I procrastinate. It's a bad habit. I try to break it, but that's part of why I rock with Game Time, because I can still be true to me, true to the procrastination in my soul, and still get last minute tickets to the games and events that I want to go to. With Game Time, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever. Plus, now Game Time is an authorized marketplace of the Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even easier and faster for you. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. One of my favorite Game Time features is being able to see a view from my seat before I buy the tickets. It's just really clutch to be able to see what the actual view of my seat's going to be before I get there. So like if I go somewhere new, I don't want to be geek for the show just to get there and find out I'm sitting behind a pillar or something. So Game Time helps me see the view before I make the purchase. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Time is valuable. You can't get that back, so we appreciate you spending it with us here on Locked On Bucks. A special shout out to the everydayers who tune in Monday through Friday. You be watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all day long. I know you probably just like to have some sports on in the background, but do you find yourself having to turn the volume down with all the shouting? If so, make the switch over to Locked On Sports today. Free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. So check out Locked On Sports Today on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, or on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Now, Frank, like we mentioned before we got into the break here, the non-Dame minutes, they were really big in this game. Like I mentioned, Dame played the whole first quarter, played the whole third quarter. He sat the start of the second and sat the start of the fourth. During the 5 or so minutes without Dame to start the second, the Bucks were plus 11. Without him to start the fourth, they were plus 10. And that was such a big moment, especially coming into that fourth quarter where the Bucks had that bad third quarter. The Pacers got back into the game. They were only down by 12. Fourth quarter opens, and here comes Khris Middleton with a big three, getting the Bucks back on the board. Here comes Bobby with an and one, helping to stretch that lead back out for the Bucks. The non-Dame minutes were really impressive, in my opinion, for this team, especially a team without Giannis. So the staggering, of course, you're just looking to have at least Dame on the court or at least Khris on the court at all times. The Bucks were able to do that, and they did not lose the non-Dame minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the weirdest stat from this game is Dame ends up a -6, and in
Yeah.
38 minutes, and they're plus 21 in the 10 minutes that you referenced to start the second and fourth quarters. And I said, among a few other things during this week, this was a major litmus test series for Bobby Portis. He really didn't play well against the Pacers this regular season. He was like a 10 points on like 49% true shooting. I mean, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to get buckets like Bobby does against the Pacers, right? I mean, it's not like Miles Turner is shutting down the kind of stuff that Bobby does, and Miles isn't even guarding Bobby most of the time anyway. So not a monster night from Bobby, 15 points on I think 14 shots, 11 rebounds, but some timely buckets, had 8 straight points in the second quarter. And the other thing too is, I mean, the fact that the Pacers were not able to take advantage on the offensive end for them defensively for the Bucks when Bobby, it was essentially Bobby as the big man in those lineups, right? And they start the second quarter on a 14-3 run. It goes from 30 to 21 to 44 to 24, I think, before Dame comes back in those 5 minutes. And the Pacers, especially the way that they can push the ball in transition, the way they can, attack the paint, even in half court, as much as the 3-point shooting was a story tonight, and the fact that they really struggled, 21%, they're not really a team that is like, especially with the departure of Buddy Hield, the injury to Benedict Mathurin, they're not really constructed to be like just a crazy, blow you out of the water from 3-point range type team. Now the Bucks gave them a lot of good looks tonight, and I think
Especially in the second half.
yeah, in part because of the fact that they have a lot of guys, who like the Ben Shepherds of the world, who like, I mean, he was like a 31% 3-point shooter. Turner is a good 3-point shooter, but like you kind of live with him shooting threes to an extent. And again, they have other guys like Jalen Smith or Obi Toppin, guys that are kind of have good percentages, but don't take many shots. And I think we've seen that before, when they put Brooke on Jalen Smith, when Jalen Smith was starting earlier in the year, and they're just basically like, we're just going to try to protect the paint, knock yourself out, if you want to shoot a bunch of 3-pointers. So, it was the fact that they were able to not just survive, but, do well defensively when in those Bobby minutes. How sustainable is that? I don't know. I think Rick Carlisle certainly will be looking at that closely. But I would say in general, like Khris was just huge, right? I mean, the storyline is obviously going to be Dame for good reason, but a year ago, Khris put up big numbers in that first series against the Heat. It's kind of lost to the sands of history given what happened in the series. But I think he averaged like 24 games, something like that, on good efficiency. And tonight, 23 points on 9 out of 14, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, just 1 turnover. Especially you think about Khris, at times he can get sped up, gets ball pressure, turns the ball over. That turnover came on the first possession of the game when he threw a pass that was somehow too high for Brook Lopez, which is hard to do. Didn't turn the ball over, the remaining 47 minutes of the game. And he only played 35. They didn't even need to stretch him, maybe more than they would have liked. So, yeah, I mean, he was huge. Hit that 3 to start the fourth quarter, got to his mid-range a couple times. And, again, I thought it was important. It was interesting to see how they handled that. It wasn't that they just put the ball in Khris's hands and made him dribble up against pressure the entire way. He's facing Aaron Nesmith, who's, arguably their best perimeter defender. And so I thought it was kind of smart what they did is they basically just put him on the left side and let, Pat Bev or Connaughton or whoever bring the ball up. And then, essentially had Khris come off a screen coming to the middle of the court to where then he can work, a pick and roll type action, and he can either pull up, find a man rolling, whatever it is. So, yeah, just a really, again, the under control, steady, calming influence of Khris Middleton was, I thought, just really important. And Indiana wasn't able to get him or the Bucks overall kind of sped up in ways that can kind of cause them problems. Only 10 turnovers total for the Bucks. I mentioned Khris only had one, and Indiana had 12. And the fact that Pat Bev has 8 assists, 1 turnover, including that one where he like fell down and then flipped it to Bees for a 3 in the, I think was that in the fourth quarter, in the second half at least. I thought that was kind of symbolic of kind of how this game went versus the fact that Tyrese Halliburton, you basically turned him into a passer, right? Like they kind of brought enough help, forced him to basically make the right play, but only 8 assists and 3 turnovers, which, turnovers have come pretty much never, it has felt like, for Tyrese Halliburton against the Bucks this year. To sort of force 3 turnovers in the first game, you'll definitely take that. And obviously just the fact that, he really never became a big factor offensively, is, I would say, not something I expect to continue. Certainly not to the extent it was today. I mean, I can't imagine there's going to be another game in this series where he only takes 7 shots. But I mean, this is kind of the challenge of the playoffs, right? When you're a star player, you can make the right play, which I'd say he was making the quote unquote right play. You can break down his film, and he was finding open guys, moving the ball, not trying to force stuff. But this is what makes superstars, right? This is what makes Dame Dame. He forced shots. Dame forced a bunch of shots that were really difficult, and he made them. And obviously, it's been well documented, the kind of back and forth that Dame and Tyrese Halliburton had this season in the 5 games that they played during the regular season. They didn't obviously guard each other very much because they're both poor defenders, and obviously both teams try to keep them out of actions. But I'm sure we've not heard the last of Tyrese Halliburton. That I can be sure of. But certainly, I think everybody was concerned that he might come out and put on a show and, stick it to his home state team, as we've seen him do so far this season. And so for him to be contained, I think certainly there's things he can do. But we saw Pat Bev just basically saying, I'm just going to force you left pretty much whenever. He doesn't like to go that direction. Caitlin Cooper does a great job covering the Pacers. She kind of hinted on that all week. Bev has done that consistently in his previous stops. This is the first time that we've seen Beverly as a Buck playing against Halliburton. And so again, I'm not going to sit here and say like Pat Bev shut Tyrese Halliburton down. No, that's not what happened. But I thought he put in a good shift, and I thought Malik Beasley did as well. I thought Beasley at the time was denying him the ball. So again, you just say, okay, well, hopefully this is a sign that he's not going to have a monster series, but certainly we'll see better from him in games 2 and onward.
Yeah, I think it's smart to assume that Tyrese Halliburton isn't going to be kept in single digits throughout the entire series. Like if that happens, like bravo, like kudos to the Bucks defense, but not something I'm expecting. A point that you made about the Bucks against the pressure that really sold to me as well was, like, especially in the fourth quarter when the Pacers were really ramping up the full court pressure on the team, just seeing the fact that they were making the right passes out of the pressure. And I noticed that throughout the game where they're making the right passes. And that was one thing throughout the week of practice that we heard with the multiple injuries that they had, with Doc saying like, hey, had to do an alternate here. Now this practice is actually Khris with the ball in his hands a lot of plays for Khris, a lot of plays for Bobby, them getting them used to the pressure, getting them used to seeing traps and all of that type of that went into practice this week with them trying to prepare for what they might see as a primary ball handler. And it seemed like it came in really handy for this team. They looked really sharp when it came to making decisions out of pressure throughout the game, which is something that sometimes we've seen, like you mentioned, Khris Middleton get sped up. We've seen guys just try to do a little too much in those situations. So to see them make the right decision was really encouraging. And I want to talk more after the break about what we saw tonight that might be sustainable, and also talk a bit about that Bucks defense that did a pretty good job against one of the best offenses in the NBA so far this regular season. So all that after the break. I love me some Prize Picks, y'all. It wasn't too friendly to me today on this day of the playoffs, but I get exactly why Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and the most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less than on 2 or more player stat projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in. So make sure y'all get into this playoff action. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you get with the world's best players and take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. That means turning $10 into $1,000. Basketball, hockey, college basketball, whatever it is, you can get those entries taken care of on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the sports action in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, Georgia, and of course, Wisconsin. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Okay, Frank. So sustainability from this team carrying over into game two. What can we think that like, hey, they can keep doing this? This is something they should keep doing. And also, like, maybe they shouldn't do this so much. What might the Pacers like to throw out? All those questions are things that are going to be talked about, of course, until we get to game two on Tuesday. So I definitely want to get your opinion on it. Like, one thing that stood out to me, I was shocked at times to see that Doc went with a Khris Middleton, Bobby Portis front court, but it's something I've had a background interest in, but more so thinking of it with Khris and Giannis going small in that way. So it was really interesting to see Khris out there as a small ball four at times. He had that Siakam matchup quite a few times as well throughout the night. And Siakam was really the Pacers' saving grace when it came to keeping the scoreboard moving for them. 15 to 25 on the night, 36 points. I believe that was a career playoff high for Pascal Siakam as well. And watching the game and seeing Siakam get a lot of buckets, a lot of ISO, a lot of mid-rangers. Brooke was on him, and I was like, I can live with that if that is going to be what the crux of the offense is. And I'm like, hey, if the Pacers' leading scorers are going to be Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner, if you want them taking over 40 shots a game going forward through the playoffs, that's fine by me. Like, I can definitely live with that if that is something that's the way the Pacers want to run their offense. Like we mentioned, I'm not sure how likely that is given the fact that, Tyrese Halliburton only had 7 shots in this game. Not to say that Tyrese Halliburton is somebody who goes out and hunts his own shots. He is perfectly fine being a guy who only takes 5 shots if his team wins because he likes setting his guys up for success. But if the offense for the Pacers keeps running through their bigs, that's something I think that bodes very well for the Bucks.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Right after the game ended, I was kind of like, okay, so what is it? Why is Tyrese Halliburton only taking 7 shots? And so I went back and rewatched kind of like a few different parts of the game. I think there was like, there's always got to be multiple ingredients, right? Because you can never just defend a guy that smart and that talented one way. I think we hit on the one, right? Pat Bev trying to force him left. That's obviously one. He's not going to drive and get to the rim and finish in the same way that we saw. I mean, we saw him punch 2 dunks on guys in January in Milwaukee, right? Going to his right. So making him go left, again, not that he can't get to like a step back there, but his step back accuracy has gone down a fair bit since coming back from the injury. I think Seth Partnow had a stat that he was like 38% on like pull up threes prior to the injury and like low 30s since then. So we didn't really see much of that. And then just a couple other things too. I mean, one, putting Brooke on Siakam basically means, okay, if you want to basically go against our drop big, you have to do it with Pascal Siakam. And, it's interesting because you think of Miles Turner as like a pick and pop big, but one of the things that's made him, I think, much better and why the Pacers have gotten much more dangerous offensively is because he's really learned how to roll and be a dual threat in pick and roll. So yes, he can, pop and settle for those step back threes or the, spot up threes. But we've also seen him really hurt the Bucks rolling to the rim, and he had double digit paint scoring nights a number of occasions so far this year. And, again, like just putting Brooke in these really hard spots, like do you try to take away Tyrese's floater or do you cover Miles rolling to the rim? And putting putting Brooke on Siakam just changes the calculus, because now, well, you don't have your drop big playing against Miles Turner. And so, Pascal was very content to kind of hang back and take those little mid-range jumpers. The Bucks were basically, Brooke was sitting back far enough, but not too far to like give Tyrese easy runways to the basket. And you had enough kind of rear contests from Bev that, Tyrese was throwing kind of like those lofted passes to Siakam in the middle. And yeah, I mean, he got good looks from mid-range, but at the end of the day, he was just taking a lot of his baskets were mid-range shots, especially in the first half. So, I think you live with Pascal Siakam taking a bunch of mid-range jumpers, and credit to him, he hit a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And I think he's a guy that is very valuable in the sense that he can play slow and more methodical in the half court compared to what maybe they're used to doing. But kind of some of the other things he's doing, it was interesting at times they tried to attack Dame with Nembhard and in the pick and roll. And, that I think they got at least one bucket that way. But, again, it's taking you away from kind of your best players if you're putting the ball in Nembhard's hand. But I'm a huge Nembhard fan. I was hoping was pre Dame trade. He was like, man, I wish, if the Bucks could get like Nembhard to be like your backcourt mate for Drew, that would be awesome, right? Good defender, like has some offensive game, whatever. But so much for that. Actually, it would still be a really nice fit. Would be a really nice fit for Dame, but yeah, probably not. I think they're going to hang on to him. But yeah, so just kind of different things. And then obviously, like when you try to attack Bobby with Turner, Bobby's usually playing pretty aggressively. So like they're kind of trapping, hedging hard, and that's going to force the ball out of your hands. I thought it was interesting. We didn't see any zone today. I think if the Pacers, that zone is usually what the Bucks go to when things are not going well. So I hope we don't see much zone this series, but I think there's a potential role for it just as a change up. So yeah, it's just, I think it's just going to be an interesting chess match between the coaches and Tyrese and the defense kind of throughout the series, just to see how kind of goes back and forth. But I don't know, it's one of these things, right? Like after a first game, like the losing team will always say like, well, the thing that went well, it's not going to keep going that well. Like Dame's not going to score 35 points every half. Well, he's probably not going to have another scoreless half in the rest of the series either. So, every game's different, right? Like that's kind of the story of it. And I think it'll be interesting to see how much the Bucks just continue to challenge the Pacers to shoot open 3-pointers, because they have guys like the Ben Shepherds of the world who statistically are not great 3-point shooters, or even some of the guys that shoot good percentages are not guys that are high volume shooters. So I think that's probably one of the interesting questions and trade-offs the Bucks are going to have to make is, are they going to continue to basically tell Tyrese, like, you're not going to be able to give it to Miles Turner or your roll man, so throw it to some other more of a role player type guy to shoot threes. And there's going to be at least one game, perhaps multiple, hopefully not too many, where those guys are going to hit some threes. But, they only shot 30% from three against the Bucks all season and won 4 out of 5. So they don't need to shoot threes really well to beat you. And tonight, obviously, they did not shoot well at all. But most importantly, too, like, 40 paint points and 8 of 38 from three. Like, that's a recipe that is generally going to work out pretty well for the Bucks.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, the Bucks defense, like we haven't touched on it a lot. So just before we wrap up here, just the Bucks defensive efforts. They did their thing. Like I mentioned, the Pacers are a high scoring team, held them to 94 points today. Watching the playoff games ahead of the Bucks, I kept saying, oh, this playoff whistle should really be in the Bucks' favor with how they like to play. And they were able to play that physical style of defense. They were able to get up into the Pacers. A lot of things that were be called fouls in the regular season were not being called fouls tonight in this game as well. So looking to see how the Bucks defensive effort keeps up. They were pretty good in transition defense tonight as well. Only a couple of buckets where I was like, that came off a bad shot selection. Shouldn't have taken that one. It helped fuel the Pacers. But for the most part, it was pretty good defensive efforts for them in transition. And something I'm looking forward to seeing in the upcoming game, because I'm expecting the Pacers to apply that type of pressure to Dame a lot sooner come game 2. Like, hey, you guys make somebody else beat us. Let's get the ball out of Dame's hands, and seeing how the Bucks respond to that in game 2 as well. Who else can step up? You want to see more Khris Middleton for sure. You want to see Bobby Portis. You also want to see some of those bench guys when they get their opportunities to make sure they're knocking down those big shots. I mean, like Jay Crowder only played 12 minutes tonight, but he was 1 or 2 from 3, and that 3 he hit was huge. Needed it. So if that's what's going to be happening, we're going to need the bench guys as well to make the most of their opportunities. Like even Pat Connaughton had a 4-point play. Although the 3, I was like, no. And he makes them like, all right, cool. Like 4-point.
It was a quick
play.
3. It was a quick trigger 3. I was like, Pat,
super
really?
quick.
Yeah. By the way,
but he made it 4-point
yeah.
play. Like we're going to need those efforts from the Bucks going throughout the series.
But we always complain, like all the season long, people complain about the Bucks bench getting outscored. I think 20-19, the Bucks outscored the Pacers bench, which the Pacers bench, obviously, aside from, a certified Bucks killer, TJ McConnell, has some pretty kind of sketchy options on it, especially with Mathurin out for the rest of the season. But TJ McConnell still had a few moments there in the second half where he kind of was doing his super pest thing, but overall 5 of 13 from the field, only 10 points. And I think, what was he, minus 13 or something like that? I mean, he is like the cockroach of this league to me. Like he just will not die, will not go away. I'm expecting he's going to have much bigger games throughout the series. So I for one will just go to sleep being thankful that TJ McConnell, Bucks killer the last couple years, not just this year, but in previous years as well. The Bucks were able to contain him a little bit. He tried to go at my boy AJ Green, who been talking up AJ Green's individual defense for a little while now. And I was like, oh, TJ McConnell, man, even the little white guys are racially profiling AJ Green, trying to take it at AJ Green because he's another little white guy. But guess what? He's not as little. He's definitely as white as TJ McConnell, but he's not as little as TJ McConnell. He held up okay. But man, I wish AJ coming back from injury
could have knocked those down.
Yeah, he had a few really good looks. Had a few really good looks. You expect him to knock down those threes in the fourth quarter. So, I think based on what we've seen this season, the Bucks are going to have to win the battle of the 3-point line. I think to win this series. And again, just one game in, but at least they checked the box here in the first game.
Yeah, we go home happy. We get the first win of the series. A lot more coming on Locked On Bucks this week, but that's a good place for us to stop today. For Frank and myself, we'll catch you all later.